I've got him right up there. But I think then Jacob Rodriguez is the other one that you got to look out there. 100 plus tackles for him as well. Actually, 127 total tackles, which is just a ridiculous number. So to me, with what they do, patrolling the middle of the defenses there and just, eating up a ton of tackles, both of those guys for me are up there. Beyond that, you can look at a bunch of different names. Cincinnati's linebacker Jake Golday is one that stood out to me when West Virginia played Cincinnati. I think last season he dealt with the injury bug a little bit at times. So, maybe that affected his numbers, but still, even with that, 150 plus tackles over the past 2 seasons, a really big linebacker, kind of that prototypical size that you'd want at that position. And I liked what he brought to the game there. So those were 3 that stood out to me as far as linebackers are concerned in the conference. Keaton Thomas and Jacob Rodriguez, particularly at the top for what I was looking at the numbers.
Yeah, there's only one other name that I really want to throw in here, and that's Barden from Utah. He just had a team high, 72 tackles on the team, comes in as a senior this year. And he had 2 interceptions kind of as a, former freshman All-American. So, will he have his best season as a senior? Will he put it all together? Utah's defense is something with Kyle Whittingham at the helm. I'm like, all right, see what they end up doing. But couldn't agree more on having Jacob and Keaton up there. I mean, Keaton Thomas, just anytime Baylor's on the schedule, I'm always worried about Dave Aranda's defense. So yeah. I'm kind of always annoyed by no matter what. And it seems like their offense might be clicking with Sawyer Robertson this year a little bit too. Before I get to coaches, want to ask you about defensive ends. I mean, those are the guys who Oklahoma State fans know. Basically, our season fell off after we lost Colin Oliver and Nick Martin. So middle linebacker and defensive end. There's a reason why I gravitate towards those 2 positions here, looking in 2025. But when it comes to defensive ends, is there anyone who catches your eye a little bit or makes you kind of think, hey, maybe they'd be a really good player here for the conference?
Yeah, I think you touched on right there what stood out to me when I was, kind of looking at the edge rushers for the conference for this upcoming season is a lot of that star power from, the pass rushers that were here. A lot of it has moved on, not a lot of returning necessarily edge rushers that really stand out. A lot of these guys coming in, I think, are transfers that are going to stand out that I at least have in my top 3 on my list here. And I went back and forth with who to have at number 1 or number 2. Part of that is trying to, keep that WVU bias out. I keep bringing up here, but ultimately, when I went through, I was like, I can't keep my bias out here on this one. For me, Jamori Robinson, the pass rusher that West Virginia brought in from UTSA. He was the defensive player of the year last year in the AAC conference, 15 sacks. And so I have him just a little bit above who I have there at number 2. I think that he's my top pass rusher potentially for the conference this year. Coming off the edge, he's put on a good bit of weight since he got to West Virginia. He was here for the spring. I think he's up to nearly 290 now. Going to be more of a hand in the dirt. They kind of used him more in the outside linebacker role at UTSA. Going to use him more as a hand in the dirt defensive end here at WVU. Really excited about what he brings to the table. West Virginia hasn't really had a pure pass rusher come in quite some time, maybe since Bruce Irvin, 15 years ago at this point. So excited about Jamori Robinson. I think he's going to be one to watch in the conference. And then another transfer that came in. We mentioned Texas Tech earlier in the show and their transfer class. They've had a couple, standout edge rushers they brought in. And David Bailey, to me, is one that really stands out. I've got him up there, one of the better edges in the conference, I think. 14 and a half sacks at his 3 years playing at Stanford. So not only does he bring a ton of playing experience, playing in a power conference already to the table, he's shown that he can get it done rushing the passer, nearly 15 sacks in his 3 seasons as well. And then you look at UCF and Malachi Lawrence. I think that's a guy that you got to keep an eye on. 13 sacks throughout his career, and he can get it done coming off the edge as well. So, I tried to find some returners. I did get Malachi Lawrence in there, but I think the transfers is what maybe the storyline to watch here at edge rushers this upcoming season here when we're talking defensive ends in the conference.
Yeah, for me at least, there's only a couple Oklahoma State guys I would even throw in mentioning year period. Clearly, I'm not huge on the Oklahoma State depth and experience, and hey, transfer portal, all the type of stuff here. We could learn here a whole new type of deal by the end of the season. But I do want to shout out Obi Exigbo. Last year, I totally butchered that pronunciation, but he is a defensive end for Oklahoma State that last year had 19 total solo tackles, 3 sacks on a year where you're not talking about the defense. And so I think there's a lot to say is he could be a guy who, at the end of the year, making a couple Big 12 defensive honors and getting a couple Big 12, maybe all defensive second team or something like that here, just because he is the guy who's basically going to have to get to the pass rusher.